Space has a way of erasing its own stories. Metal rusts, circuits fail, and forgotten colonies drift through the darkness like abandoned thoughts. Explorers grow accustomed to ruins, silent places that surrendered to vacuum and time. But every so often, something defies the natural decay of the universe, something that shouldn't exist anymore. And that is exactly what awaited Maia Rios on Édola. When engineer Maia Rios arrived at the Édola colony, she expected the predictable: a derelict outpost worn down by centuries of cosmic dust, micrometeor collisions, and the slow grinding of entropy. The colony had vanished from all official records 300 years earlier, swallowed by silence. To any rational mind, Édola should have been nothing more than a drifting mausoleum of metal. But what she found instead felt like an insult to logic. The outer hull was pristine, untouched by erosion or cosmic radiation. The docking bay lights flickered to life the moment her ship approached, as if greeting a visitor who had merely stepped out for a moment. The airlock cycled flawlessly, its seals smooth and flexible, not brittle, not aged, not tired. Inside, every corridor gleamed with sterile brightness. It was as though time had refused to enter. Maia stepped through the station with a growing sense of unease. Nothing creaked, nothing hummed irregularly. Machines purred with the precision of a facility maintained daily by human hands. Yet no maintenance logs existed past the year of the colony's disappearance. There were half-finished cups of tea resting on counters, data pads lying open on desks, and chairs pushed back slightly as if their occupants had just risen moments before. But there were no people. 3 centuries were meant to leave scars: rust, dust, broken hinges, collapsed systems. Yet Édola bore none of them. It was not abandoned, it was paused. And Maia felt as though she had stepped not into a forgotten structure, but into a moment. One single moment, stretched impossibly across 300 years. The colony was not dead, it was simply waiting. And whatever had frozen it in time was still here, hiding somewhere within its immaculate halls.
Maia had expected ghosts, the quiet kind that lingered only in dust and abandoned footprints. Instead, she found children. They appeared at the far end of a corridor, emerging from the soft blue glow of the station's emergency lights. A cluster of small figures, perfectly still, watching her with the kind of calm that no child should possess. For a moment, Maia thought they were holograms left on some automated loop, until one of them tilted their head. The movement was subtle, but unmistakably human. As she drew closer, she realized what unsettled her most. They looked no older than 12. Their clothing was immaculate, their hair neatly kept, their faces untouched by struggle or time. But their eyes, those eyes carried the solemn weight of memory far older than their bodies suggested. It was as if the years had passed through them instead of over them. One girl stepped forward. She was small, with dark hair tied back in a simple braid, but her expression was composed, almost diplomatic. "You came back," she said. The words struck Maia with quiet force. She'd never been here before. "I think you're mistaken," Maia replied gently. "I've only just arrived." The girl studied her as though comparing her to a memory that refused to cooperate. "Maybe not you, but someone like you." The children gathered behind her said nothing, yet their silence felt intentional, as if they'd spoken among themselves for centuries and had nothing left to debate. Maia crouched to meet their eyes. "Where are your parents, the other colonists?" A faint ripple of reaction crossed their faces. Pain, nostalgia, confusion, emotions too layered and too momentary to belong to ordinary children. "They left," the girl answered softly. A pause. "Or they stayed. We don't remember the same way anymore." The statement chilled Maia in a way the cold metal floors never could. She realized then that these children were not survivors in the traditional sense. They were anomalies, being suspended at the threshold of adolescence while carrying the knowledge of lifetimes. Their youth was a facade maintained by the anomaly, but their minds had lived far too long. "Who takes care of you?" Maia asked. "We do," another boy murmured. His voice was polite, steady, painfully mature. "We always have." Maia felt something twist inside her, pity, awe, and fear interwoven so tightly she couldn't untangle them. These children were not children who had been abandoned. These were children whom time itself had refused to let grow. And the moment she looked into their eyes, she understood something unspoken. They were not afraid of her. They were afraid of what her arrival might mean. For the first time in centuries, someone had stepped into their moment. Someone who did not belong to eternity.
There were silences Maia had grown used to in her career, the dead quiet of derelict stations, the hollow echo of abandoned mining rigs, the soft hum of empty habitats drifting through starless regions. But the silence inside Édola was different. It felt aware. As she stepped deeper into the station, Maia couldn't shake the sensation that the air itself was listening. Every footstep, no matter how light, seemed to ripple through the corridors as if disturbing a delicate balance that had remained untouched for centuries. It wasn't the absence of sound that unsettled her. It was the feeling that something underneath that silence was holding its breath. Lights flickered softly overhead, responding to her movement with uncanny precision. Not flickering like failing systems, but like eyes adjusting to the presence of someone new. The temperature shifted slightly as she passed, not randomly, but as though the environment were calibrating itself around her. Then came the whispers of machinery, steady, controlled, perfectly synchronized. No abandoned station maintained that level of stability. No forgotten colony kept its systems humming in flawless rhythm, not without someone or something guiding it. Maia paused in a long corridor that stretched into a vanishing point of sterile white. The sound of her breathing seemed too loud. She turned, half expecting one of the children to be following her, but the hallway remained empty. Yet she felt watched. Not with malice, not even with curiosity, but with a kind of quiet recognition, as if the walls themselves remembered every person who had ever walked there and were comparing Maia to those memories. A strange hum pulsed faintly through the floor. Maia knelt, placing her gloved hand against the smooth metal. It vibrated gently, like a heartbeat beneath the structure. The colony wasn't just functional, it was responsive. It behaved less like a machine and more like a dormant organism sensing a disturbance after centuries of stillness. The deeper she went, the stronger the feeling grew. Édola wasn't simply frozen in time, it was preserved, held in a state of readiness, waiting. But for what? She reached a junction where 3 hallways converged. A maintenance terminal flickered to life the moment she approached, displaying a diagnostic screen in pristine condition. Systems nominal, power stable, atmospheric balance perfect. Not a single error, not a single anomaly. Impossible. A station abandoned for 300 years should have been a graveyard of failures. But Édola operated with the precision of a place that expected its residents to return at any moment. And there was something else, something the silence refused to conceal. Every mirror-like surface reflected her shape, but behind her form there were distortions, shadows that flickered for just a second longer than they should, warping glints of motion that vanished when she turned her head, as though echoes of past inhabitants still lingered, trying to align themselves with the present and failing. Maia swallowed hard. The silence thickened around her, pressing gently against her shoulders. This was no ordinary stillness. It was intentional, constructed, sustained, like a guardian protecting an unfinished story, or a warning holding its ground. Whatever paused the flow of time in Édola was not gone. It lived within that silence, patient and watchful, marking Maia not as an intruder, but as the first turning point in 3 centuries.
Maia had interviewed survivors before. She had listened to accounts fractured by trauma, shaped by fear, eroded by the slow weathering of time. But nothing prepared her for the memories held by the children of Édola. Their recollections did not fade. They did not degrade. They contradicted themselves with the precision of a paradox. It started when she asked the simplest question: what happened here? A boy named Lior answered first. We celebrated the mid-solar festival. There were lights everywhere. A girl immediately beside him frowned. There was no festival. The power grid failed that day. Another child added softly, I remember both. Maia felt a chill slide down her spine. They weren't correcting each other. They weren't arguing. They were describing different versions of the same moment, multiple truths layered over each other, like pages printed with incompatible stories, and somehow each child believed every one of them. Maia tried to anchor the conversation. Okay, what was the last thing you remember before the station was sealed? A long silence followed, not because they hesitated, but because they were searching, sifting through centuries of memories that refused to line up. Finally, Yara stepped forward. Our last night was warm. We were all asleep when the alarms went off. No, another boy interjected. Everyone was awake. We were gathered in the atrium. A third voice whispered. It wasn't night. It was morning. You weren't there. Their faces remained calm, but Maia could see the strain behind their eyes, like minds trying to hold incompatible timelines together through sheer will. She opened her tablet, scanning for environmental logs. The data echoed the same impossibility. Multiple power fluctuations recorded at the same timestamp, overlapping sensor readings, contradictory timestamps that indicated both stability and catastrophic failure. It was as if the colony had lived several different versions of its final day simultaneously, and all of them had been preserved. Maia began to notice more signs. A photograph showing the same family in 2 different outfits at the same moment. A medical record listing a child as both injured and unharmed. A corridor wall with faint impressions where furniture once stood, except that the digital blueprint showed no furniture had ever been installed there. Reality itself had been edited, not erased, overwritten, revised, rearranged, repeated. The children remembered every version. What did this to you? Maia murmured.
Yara answered with a calm that felt too grown for her face. "Time broke," she said simply, "and we were caught inside the pieces." As Maia listened, she realized something far more unsettling. The children weren't confused. They understood their fractured memories perfectly. It was Maia who lacked the framework to comprehend them. To them, memory was not linear. Time was not a river. It was an ocean. Vast, layered, overlapping, where multiple histories swirled together without merging, and for 300 years they had been adrift in it. Maia felt the weight of that revelation settle in her chest like cold metal. The colony hadn't just been frozen in time, it had been fractured across it. And the children? They were the only ones who survived the shattering.
For Maia Rios, logic had always been a lifeline. When the universe revealed something strange, something frightening, something that bent reality until it groaned, she turned to science. She believed that every anomaly, no matter how extraordinary, hid a pattern. Every mystery had a mechanism. Every impossibility was simply a problem not yet understood. But Édola tested that belief in ways no training had prepared her for. She began her investigation in the engineering bay, powering up dormant consoles that shouldn't have been able to function after centuries of neglect. Yet, each system blinked awake flawlessly, like obedient soldiers returning from silent duty. She ran diagnostics. She reviewed reactor logs. She mapped the structural integrity. Everything was perfect, too perfect, as if entropy had politely decided to skip this place. Inside the reactor chamber, Maia expected corrosion, microfractures, degenerated shielding. Instead, she found pristine alloy surfaces and energy signatures stable enough to power a small moon. 300 years should have torn these systems apart, but here, nothing aged. Not even the dust particles seemed to settle naturally. It wasn't preservation, it was suspension. As she studied the environment, Maia began testing the air, the artificial gravity field, the electromagnetic balance. None of them behaved the way they should in a structure untouched for centuries. The rules of physics weren't broken, but they were altered, subtly twisted, as if the station existed within a pocket of space where normal laws bowed to some unseen influence. The children watched her from a distance, curious, silent, almost hopeful. She approached them with her datapad. "Do you understand what's happening to this station?" she asked. One of the younger boys, his voice steady with unsettling maturity, replied, "It's not the station that changed, it's time." Maia frowned. Time can't just stop or split or freeze selectively. The boy tilted his head. "Yours can't." That response sent a tremor through her. She turned back to her research with renewed urgency, searching for anything that resembled a conventional explanation. She analyzed radiation signatures. She examined quantum fluctuations. She scanned for wormhole residue, dark matter interference, anomalous tachyon patterns. Nothing aligned with known phenomena. But then she found something small, nearly invisible, hidden in the data streams. A temporal echo. A faint, rhythmic pulse embedded in the colony's power grid, repeating at intervals that made no mathematical sense. It wasn't a mechanical malfunction. It wasn't a signal. It wasn't even energy in the traditional sense. It was a ripple, like the after effect of a moment that had been stretched too far. A fingerprint of whatever force had bent time around Édola. Maia curidia soto. Maia's breath caught. If this echo was real, it meant one terrifying thing. Édola hadn't merely paused in time, it was being held there. Held by a force powerful enough to override natural chronology. Held deliberately. But by what? Or whom? As Maia stared at the echo waveform pulsing across her screen, she felt a presence behind her, not physical, but conceptual. A feeling that the station itself was aware of her discovery, as if Édola had been waiting centuries for someone to notice that hidden pulse, as if it wanted to be understood. For the first time in her scientific career, Maia doubted something fundamental. Maybe this wasn't an anomaly to be solved. Maybe it was an intention to be revealed.
Maia had seen corporations vanish before, swallowed by debt, scandal, or the relentless march of progress. But Archeon was different. It hadn't failed. It had disappeared, wiped clean from every public archive as though erased deliberately from humanity's memory. Her investigation began with a simple question. Who built Édola? The answer led her down a labyrinth of encrypted logs buried deep within the colony's internal servers. The moment she accessed them, the lights around her flickered, subtle, almost hesitant, like the station was reacting to the resurrection of something it had tried very hard to forget. The Archeon emblem appeared on her screen, a stylized spiral folding inward, swallowing itself. A fitting symbol, she thought. The first document was an authorization order dated 300 years earlier. It described Édola not as a mining colony, like the historical records claimed, but as a temporal resilience research site. Her stomach tightened. More files opened automatically, almost as if the system wanted her to read them. They weren't technical reports. They were conversations, fragments of internal messages exchanged by Archeon executives, scientists, and directors. Phase 1 yielded promising distortions. Subjective time variance recorded at 13%. Containment is stable, but we still don't understand the feedback loop. Proceed anyway. Investors want results. The deeper Maia read, the clearer it became. Édola wasn't a colony. It was an experiment. A controlled environment designed to study the manipulation of temporal flow, pushing time, stretching it, folding it, slowing it. But something went wrong, terribly wrong. Another file appeared, time-stamped just hours before Édola vanished from the public network. SS Protocol. Continue. The message ended abruptly, as if cut mid-transmission. The corruption wasn't random. It looked intentional. And then Maia found the final document, buried under layers of encryption, protected by a failsafe that had somehow remained active across centuries. It wasn't text, it was a video. A man in a lab coat spoke to the camera hurriedly, his voice unsteady. If you're seeing this, Archeon is gone. The experiment exceeded containment parameters. The children, they weren't supposed to. He stopped, breathing sharply. It's not stasis, it's fragmentation. Time isn't pausing, it's multiplying. Run. Do not interact with the feed cut to static. Maia leaned back, chilled to her core. Archeon hadn't abandoned the project. It had fled from it. And the children? They weren't survivors. They were byproducts, unintended vessels trapped inside a temporal anomaly that no one had the courage or capability to fix. A sudden realization struck her. If the experiment fractured time inside Édola,
then the station itself might still be following Archeon's last directive. Protocol. Continue. Not paused, not broken, but continuing a process that had lost its creator. As Maia processed this, she sensed movement behind her. Soft footsteps, hesitant breaths. The children had gathered silently in the doorway, watching her. Ayara stepped forward. "You found the truth," she said calmly, though her eyes were shadowed by centuries of knowing more than she should. Maia's voice was barely a whisper. "What did Archeon do to you?" Ayara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked around the room, as if the walls themselves were listening, remembering. Finally, she spoke. "They tried to shape time," she murmured, "but time shaped us instead."
Maia had believed, up until that moment, that the greatest horror of Édola lay in its fractured timelines and impossible physics. But she soon realized there was something far more devastating, the emotional weight of a life that never moves forward. As she walked with the children through the atrium, she studied them more carefully. Their faces were smooth, unlined, untouched by the progression of age, but their expressions carried an exhaustion no child should ever know. It was Noor who finally explained what the anomaly had done to them. "You think time froze us," she said softly, "but it didn't. It froze everything around us, except our minds." Maia felt her breath catch. The children hadn't been preserved, they had been trapped. Their bodies remained in a perpetual state of early adolescence, but their thoughts, emotions, and consciousness had continued to evolve day after day, year after year, century after century. Noor continued, her voice steady in a way that broke Maia's heart. When you live in a world without mornings or nights, memories stop fading. Every moment stays sharp, every loss stays fresh. Another child added, "We can't forget anything." Maia realized the implications instantly. Every fear, every sadness, every confusion felt by a child had been kept alive, undiluted for 300 years. No soothing, no healing, no erosion of pain. Time, in its natural state, offers mercy through distance, but here, mercy had been stolen. The children remembered the faces of parents long gone as vividly as if they had left minutes ago. They remembered the alarms that had sounded on the colony's final day, though each remembered a different version. They remembered birthdays that never arrived, arguments that never resolved, dreams that never had the chance to change. Maia sat with them in a circle, surrounded by the soft hum of frozen machinery. The atmosphere felt heavy, like a room filled with unshed tears. "How do you endure it?" she whispered. Ayara answered, her tone calm, but shaped by centuries of emotional weight. "We learn to hold our memories like books, not to read them all at once, not to drown in them. But books can be closed. Memories don't close," Maia murmured. Ayara looked at her with eyes that were far too old for her face. "Some of ours try to, but the past is louder here. When time doesn't move, it doesn't take anything with it." Maia realized then the true cruelty of what Archeon had created. It wasn't the temporal fracture, it wasn't the collapsed timelines, it wasn't even the forced immortality, it was the denial of change.
The children of Édola had lived hundreds of years in bodies that never grew, emotions that never faded, and memories that never softened. And yet, they were still gentle, still hopeful, still capable of kindness. Maia felt something inside her shift: respect, grief, a dawning sense of responsibility. These children didn't need saving from the anomaly. They needed saving from eternity itself.
For days, Maia had examined every system, every corridor, every whisper of temporal noise that hummed beneath the station's surface. And all the while, the children watched her, not with fear, not with suspicion, but with a quiet expectancy, as if they knew that eventually she would find the truth, and that truth would demand a decision. It happened one evening cycle, though evening was only a word inside a place without sunsets. The atrium lights dimmed subtly, responding to some internal rhythm the station still obeyed. Maia sat at a console, reviewing waveforms of the temporal echo she'd discovered. The ripple was growing stronger, as if reacting to her presence, as if preparing for something. She sensed movement behind her. When she turned, Yara stood alone, her small hands folded neatly in front of her, her expression steady and eerily composed for someone with a child's face. "Maia," she said softly, "we need to talk." Maia straightened. There was something different in Yara's voice: weight, resolution, and a steadiness that carried centuries beneath its surface. "What is it?" Maia asked. Yara took a breath before speaking. "You've been trying to understand how this happened, but what matters now is what comes next." Maia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "I'm trying to help, but the anomaly, it's still active. I don't yet know if it can be reversed." Yara stepped closer, and for the first time, Maia saw the full depth of the child's burden, an eternity of memories held behind eyes that should have been curious, innocent, untroubled. "We don't need you to reverse it," Yara said. Her voice wavered, not with fear, but with the gravity of a choice no child should have to articulate. "We need you to let us choose." Maia's breath caught. "Choose? Choose what?" Yara continued, her tone unwavering. "Everyone who built this place made decisions for us. Archeon decided what we would become. Time decided how we would live. The anomaly decided what we would remember. But none of it was ours." She looked toward the other children gathering silently at the entrance of the room. Noor, Leor, and the others, their faces calm, their posture firm. "We've been trapped between seconds for so long that we stopped counting," Yara said. "We can endure that. We've endured it for centuries." Her voice softened. "But endurance is not the same as living." Maia felt something sharp twist inside her chest. "What are you asking me to do?" she asked gently. Yara met her gaze without hesitation. "Give us the choice to remain as we are or to let time return." The weight of that request hit Maia with staggering force. If she restored time, the consequences could be catastrophic. Centuries could collapse into seconds. Bodies that had never grown might suddenly age beyond endurance. Memories layered across fractured timelines might overwhelm them entirely. But if she did nothing, they would remain imprisoned in an eternal present, alive, conscious, and forever denied the simple human right to change. The children stepped forward as one, forming a quiet semicircle around Yara. "We are ready to decide our own future," Yara said, "but we cannot act on the anomaly ourselves. You are the variable it responds to. You are the first change it has allowed." Maia felt tears prick at her eyes. She had come here as an engineer, a scientist, an investigator, But now she stood as the only bridge between these children and a fate they had been denied for 3 centuries. A fate they finally wanted to claim. She knelt in front of Yara, meeting eye to eye. "You deserve the right to choose," she whispered, "and I promise I won't let anyone take that from you again." Around them, the station hummed, low, resonant, almost alive, as if it understood that the moment it had been waiting for had finally arrived.
The decision was made in a room that had not changed in 3 centuries. Maia stood before the temporal core, a sphere of interwoven energy coils humming with the faint rhythmic pulse of the anomaly. The children gathered behind her in a silent crescent, their faces illuminated by the shifting glow. No fear, no hesitation, only resolve. The station itself felt suspended in anticipation, every panel humming at a slightly higher frequency, every light trembling as though the walls were holding their breath. Maia placed her hand on the activation console. Before she initiated the sequence, she turned to them. "This may hurt," she warned softly. Yara nodded once. "We know, but pain is part of living, and we want to live." Those were the last words spoken before everything changed. Maia entered the override code. A low vibration rolled through the station, deep and resonant, like the awakening of something ancient. The temporal core brightened, first to a gentle white, then to a fierce, blinding gold. The silence collapsed. A sound tore through the room, like 1,000 overlapping timelines snapping back into alignment. The air thickened, gravity wavered, shadows bent in impossible directions. And then, the children began to scream, not out of fear, but from the overwhelming sensation of movement, something they had not felt in 300 years. Time surged through their bodies, rushing into every cell, every memory, every abandoned corner of their consciousness. Their minds, once stretched across centuries, were suddenly forced into a single linear path. Noor fell to her knees, clutching her head. Lior stumbled backward, gasping for air that now felt new, as if oxygen itself had regained its passage through moments. Yara stood the longest, her face lifted toward the shifting light, tears streaming freely, as though each drop carried the weight of 100 unspoken lifetimes. Maia lunged to support her, but Yara shook her head. "Don't stop it," she cried. "Let it finish." The core reached critical resonance. A shock wave rippled outward, sweeping through the station like a tidal wave of chronology. Rooms that had been suspended in perfect stillness flickered. Cups finally cooled, dust settled, lights dimmed from years of overuse that struck them all at once. Objects aged in seconds. Panels cracked. Metal groaned. The children were affected differently. Some began to age rapidly, skin tightening, bones lengthening, growing as though making up for years stolen from them. Others collapsed unconscious, overwhelmed by the sudden reintegration of fractured memories into a single coherent lifetime. One child screamed a name, perhaps a parent long dead, as if finally remembering their loss in full clarity for the first time. Another wept silently, her shoulders trembling, overwhelmed not by pain, but by the simple miracle of feeling time flow again. Maia moved among them desperately, checking pulses, stabilizing breathing, guiding them to the floor as their bodies adjusted to change. The station shook violently. The core's golden glow fractured into thousands of shimmering shards of light, each one bursting into the air like a firefly escaping captivity. And then, silence. But this silence was different from the one before. This silence was alive. The temporal core powered down, its coils dimming to a gentle, exhausted blue. The station settled. The children lay scattered across the atrium, breathing, trembling, but alive in a way they had never been before. Maia looked around, her own chest rising and falling rapidly, tears blurring her vision. Iara pushed herself up slowly, her body visibly changed, slightly older, slightly taller, as if claiming the first few years of a childhood she had never lived. She met Maia's gaze with eyes still ancient, but now softened by something new: hope. "Thank you," she whispered. "We felt the sunrise." Maia's throat tightened. There had been no sunrise in Édola for 3 centuries, but for the first time, the children had experienced the passing of a moment. Time had returned, and with it, the possibility of a future.
In the quiet hours that followed the collapse of the anomaly, Édola felt like a different place entirely. The air was no longer heavy with that unnatural stillness. It moved softly now, breathing life through the corridors like a long dormant creature awakening from hibernation. For the first time in 3 centuries, time existed here. Maia walked slowly through the atrium, stepping over fragments of metal and flickering panels, signs of a station finally allowed to age. The children rested in blankets she had gathered from storage rooms, their chests rising and falling with the fragile rhythm of sleep. Some now looked a year or 2 older. Some looked unchanged. Some had faces softened by the exhaustion of too many lifetimes, finally merging into one. But all of them looked undeniably alive. Iara was the first to wake. She blinked slowly, adjusting to a world no longer frozen. When her eyes met Maia's, the difference was unmistakable. The stillness behind her gaze, the centuries of trapped memories had not vanished, but they no longer pressed outward, like a weight threatening to crush her. Instead, they flowed beneath the surface, steady and quiet, like a river that had finally found its course. "What happens now?" Maia asked gently. Iara sat up, her small hands folded in her lap, her expression contemplative. "Now we learn how to live in one direction again." She smiled faintly, a real smile this time, not the solemn, knowing expressions shaped by centuries of forced introspection. "We don't know how to grow," she admitted, "but we're ready to try." Noor stirred beside her, rubbing her eyes. Lior rolled onto his back, staring up at the ceiling with a look of awe at its slow, natural flicker, the flicker of a failing light rather than a timeless one. They were witnessing the beauty of imperfection, of decay, of change. For beings who had endured a perfect, unbroken present for hundreds of years, this fragile world of entropy was a miracle. Maia knew their path would be difficult. The universe outside would not understand them. Children who carried centuries of memory, victims of an experiment erased from history. But she also knew they wouldn't have to face it alone. "I'll take you back to the nearest council station. We'll find people who can help." Iara shook her head gently. "We don't want to be studied. We don't want to become another experiment." Maia knelt beside her. "Then what do you want?" Iara looked around the atrium, the only home she had ever known, a place that imprisoned and protected them in equal measure. "To choose," she said simply. "To decide our lives for ourselves, one day at a time." Maia felt a deep swell of respect. They had lost 3 centuries, but what they truly sought was freedom, not from the anomaly, but from the destiny forced upon them. She nodded. "Then I'll help you build that future." Before their departure, Maia stepped into the corridor one final time. The walls that once vibrated with the tension of suspended time were now dim. Panels flickered with the fatigue of centuries catching up all at once. Édola was dying, but in its decay, it was finally honest. It had fulfilled its final purpose, to release those it had held for too long. The temporal echo,
That strange ripple that had haunted the station was silent now, its pulse ended, its story complete. Maia exhaled slowly, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. Not the weight of responsibility, but the weight of witnessing something profoundly human, the moment a people reclaimed their future. As the children gathered near the docking bay, Maia opened the ship's ramp. They stepped forward hesitantly, the way one might step on fresh ground after centuries of standing still. The moment Iara crossed the threshold, she paused, looking back at the station that had defined her entire existence, not with fear, not with anger, but with gratitude and sorrow intertwined. "Goodbye," she whispered, not to Maia, not even to the station, but to the eternity they were finally leaving behind. Maia placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Your life starts now," she said. Iara nodded. "Yes, now." And with that, the last of the children of the void stepped into time. Not as anomalies, not as relics, but as individuals finally free to grow, to change, and to move forward, one moment at a time.